Hello Whimsy Chasers, Andrea from Chasing Whimsy. I'm just going to give you a walkthrough on this image, which is using a new background, digital background that I wanted to try out that I just got from Fantasy Background Store. And I just wanted to do a walkthrough for you because I haven't done one in a while. So this is what the image looked like. This is actually one of the images that I shot in England when I taught my masterclass over there on fairies and fantasy editing. So this was the studio setup that we did there with the lights. And this is basically what it looked like out of camera. And I just added a little bit of, I quite like how it looks like that, but this backdrop was really nice for how it absorbed the light and just kind of highlighted some areas like there was light coming from the back, which is really cool. But I always tend to lower my contrast and brighten things a little bit when I start working because I go backwards, adding shadows and things afterwards. So I'm just going to get out of the raw. This is what it looked like after I added in some fill light, brightened it, and reduced the contrast a little bit. So this is my starting point on this image. What I'm going to do is just walk through and show the steps, turning them on and off, and describe to you what I did, because as I've said before, it's really hard for me to I can't just work an image in front of you because there's so many things that I try that don't work that it would just take too long to do that. And I'm slowly getting faster at my own editing and knowing things that I want to do that are more common and, um, developing something. Pardon the background noise, I have people in my house downstairs. Anyway, so I'm just going to turn them on and show you, and that should at least give you some idea of the steps that I've taken, and I'll describe them as we go. So first thing I did was actually drop the contrast a little bit more on her hair, as you can see there. Just because I know when I go in to do the dodge and burn, I wanted it a little less contrasty when I start with that. Look at the mushroom over here. It was still quite bright and contrasty, and so I've done a brightness. Look at the mushroom. I've just taken the contrast down a little bit. Anytime I tell you to reduce your contrast, this is what I'm saying to do. Don't make it so clear, make it fuzzier by reducing the contrast. Then I added in the background. This is the background that I got from Fantasy Background Store. I just loved it. I just thought it was really neat and it would be perfect. So I have started to mask her out just roughly. I'm not crazy about this big bright spot in the back, so you'll see what I did to counter that. It could work for some images, but I didn't like it with this one, so I'm going to counter that and do some different things. So you can see I've let it kind of come a little bit in front here of my ferns. I don't know if it remains that way as we go through, but this is kind of where I've done it. I left the spotted mushroom in. The spotted mushroom was lent to me by Magic Bean Studios, which is awesome. They pretty much replicated my set for me, but my mushroom's brown. I don't really care for the spotted one myself, but I thought with this background it kind of went okay. It was cute, so I left it in there. The birds and everything everything else is a part of that background as it came. So next, okay, so here's where I started working on this up here. So using curves, a curves adjustment, let's see what I did. So I've played in all the different channels to give it kind of this peachy sort of a color to it. I then the whole background is quite yellowy and vibrant, so I wanted to turn that down. So I did a vibrance reduction. So you can see I tend to like less saturated colors a lot of times. Unless I'm doing the really fantasy bluey greeny background, I quite like the less saturated look to the image, and that matches better with her. It makes her look softer with that. So that was just a vibrance reduction. I then took a texture or a picture from some other background to start adding a little. It needed, because it was just so clear with nothing back there, I wanted some more leaves and things showing through, so I've just very lightly brushed in at a low opacity on soft light, actually, some leaves and things in there. You can see I've also started to take out the wings that she had. The wings she was wearing were fine, but I have actually some new digital wings that I also got from Fantasy Background Store that I wanted to try in this image, so you'll see those get incorporated into this as well. So with that background back there, so this is what I brushed in, this sort of pinkish background with some leaves. It was like a forest that's tinted pink. I think it was also from Fantasy Background Store, maybe even in the same pack that this was from. So then I took the brightness down and the hue saturation to take out some of that pink to keep it with this sort of a peachy sort of a color. So that was, so there it was, and this is with the background first brushed in, kind of blocked in, and some color and saturation adjustments on that. From there, these are the wings that I added in, that I'm adding in. So there's They come on both sides. So this is the right side, obviously. That's the coloring and everything that's on them when they came in. You always need to have a shadow in behind here, otherwise it looks dumb. You can see the light is shining through there, but the light in this image is coming from the left, so she would be casting a shadow on there. So all I did was make a new layer, and I actually just painted some black on there, and I clipped it to the wing layer so I could just paint, and I might have even just made my brush kind of big like this, or kind of the size I want, and dotted it right about there. And then with a soft brush, you get a perfect round tapering out into the wing. It makes it really easy. It's always darker closer to her and coming out, so using the soft brush does that automatically for you. And when you've clipped it, don't have to worry about going over the edges. This is the back wing on the other side. I could have shown more wing than this, but this is the way the wing she was wearing looked, so I'm not worried. I tried making it bigger, but I didn't really care for it, so I'm just, I kind of like the quirky angle that it has there and that she has, so I used warp tool and perspective, etc., to get those wings exactly in the position that I wanted. Then took down the brightness of the and contrast of the whole image, just because it's still quite vibrant, everything, and I want to be able to build up my shadows and highlights. So this, I'm always adjusting my contrast up and down throughout an entire edit. You'll see it go back and forth 100 times just as I add something and change it, and just always fiddling with that to see what looks the best. So that's phase one of this one. Let me just grab the next file. This is where we were at. This is where I started going in and doing all of my retouching. You'll know from, if you watch my Dodge and Burn course, I do some stuff by hand, but I also have the Greater Than Gatsby Innocence collection, and I love their retouch set. And so that is where I do all my skin smoothing, my coloring of skin, all those adjustments that you could just do by hand, but they're just super easy with that Gatsby. I really love that product. So the smoothing one that I use in there, just as a reminder, is called the No Details. You can do the same thing with the Topaz, or with the Photoshop denoise filter can work to do that. You can also smudge paint to smooth out that, or use some of the other filters in CC. I haven't played with a lot of them because the skin smoother in Gatsby does what I want it to do, so I don't really bother with it. You can also just paint a color over top, and a really light, pick out a highlight color from the face and paint over top of it. That can help to smooth it very subtly as well. But this is with all the retouching done, that's changing her adjusting her skin tone. She's a little bit greenish looking in here. So this is with all of the skin tone adjustments, the smoothing. I've added eyelashes. I've given her rosy cheeks. I've brightened her lips. That's what I've done. So from there to there is where I have adjusted that. You can see she's starting to look a little bit different, but that's just, you're painting this, right? This is a painting, and so you do need to watch when you're playing with things like this, that you're not really altering images or someone's features, especially when you start, when you've done the smoothing. I need to put back in the highlights and shadows now, which will put her face shape back to the way that it was. This is just smoothed it all flat, so she looks a little bit different there, and we're going to build that back in. Just going to back out a little bit from there, and you'll see there's where I'm starting my Dodge and Burn. This is what on her skin. This is what I teach in my Dodge and Burn class, how to get that beautiful Dodge and Burn. This is just the first one. I usually do it more than once because I'll lose it with some of the other effects that I'm putting on, but that's just the initial playing with all the highlights and shadows and outlining all those details that are on her face. Again, before, so that's where it's totally flat, and here's where we're starting to get some dimension back to her face again. I didn't really do much on the hair yet with this, but we're going to come into that. This layer, you can see I've added some shadow here. That's actually underneath the hair that I'm going to be added. I added some hair stock to this. So this layer is just underneath. That's in the, when I'm going through them this way, the layers are backwards. So as I would do the hair, and then I would add the shadows after. So you're just seeing it backwards. So I actually used some hair stock that I added to this. I have hair stocks from Cindy Grunston. I have them from Obsidian Dawn, different places. So these ones were blonde that I added in, and that's the shape of them. I just wanted to give, her hair was pretty, but I want to just make it a little bit fuller looking. They're blonde in this one. So then I adjusted their brightness and contrast to get it where I want. They were too, it's very soft, so I wanted to increase the contrast so I could see that. And then I changed the color with the hue saturation slider to get it matching fairly close to what her actual hair is. I do more adjustments on that a bit later. Then I added another piece in here, and same thing, just a contrast and the hue adjustment to get it looking fairly close. And again, on the other side, you can see where I've kind of brushed it in and out to just kind of blend it in. Now you can see that they match here on the bottom because I just flipped it horizontal. So I didn't want to have that same the hair looking identical on either side. And so you'll see that I go along and do some adjustments with that too. So then I made it a little bit darker on that left side. So I took a piece of hair from somewhere else, like I copied a section of it, just looked down at that bottom there and just straightened it down, just so it looked different a little bit on that side. I think I actually warped it a little bit to bend some of the curves so they weren't a mirror image of each other. They're still a little bit there, but as I go through and dodge and burn and paint, I think I adjusted that a little bit more, and then change the hue on that again. And that's pretty close to what her hair was. So there was her hair. Her hair's a little bit darker, but you'll see that that kind of comes back as we're doing this too. So that's where we got it, just to give it a little bit fuller and smoother and look more painted. This hair is great because it saves me a lot of work than painting it strand by strand, because it's already painted. I still go over it, but a lot of the work is done when you use a stock like that. Then her eyes, I want to just zoom in here. Her eyes were a little bit more closed than I wanted, so I thought I would take it into liquify and see if I could warp them a little bit. I don't remember if I liquefied it or if I just grabbed a section and warped it. But watch her eyes, what I was able to do. Yeah, it was liquefied, because you can see, watch her cheek as well. Right here, I actually took a big kind of brush and pulled up to give her a little bit more smile and to open those eyes. So you can see this corner of her mouth on this side comes up with the whole cheek, because I pulled the whole thing to make that look natural, and then I opened up her eyes a little bit just by pulling on that top lid, just by pushing it up a little bit with that liquify tool. You can do things like that. You watch what you do. Sometimes you have to pull up the eyebrows a little bit when you do that too, but that's pretty cool, hey? Before and after, just to make her look a little bit brighter in her expression. I just double checked with the mom that it still looked like her when I had done that, and she said that she thought that was really pretty, so that's fine. So let's zoom out again. I then so the dress is kind of just nothing much to it. It looks very flat, so I've done some dimensioning on that. I did you can see on her face there was a darker shadow, so I did do a little bit more adjustment on there. There's some adjustments on the wings where I've added some shadows and things, but that's again all the dodge and burn type dodge and burn things that I teach you in the course, where you're just bringing in the shadows and highlights and giving it dimension and shape by playing those up. Down in the water, I've just added the ripple down there. Some people use the flood plugin. I use a displacement map. I found a tutorial online on how to create a displacement map to do this yourself, and then you run it with the filters under Photoshop's filters under distort displace. You do this displacement map, and it will do that for you. It doesn't have the same control and features and stuff that you can use in flood, but I find for what I'm doing, it's perfectly fine, and I didn't want to pay for flood, so I didn't bother. Then I decided that I wanted to make her dress pink. So I actually made a solid color layer. You can see this pink color that I've chosen in here. And I set that to color for the mode. And if you just watch her dress, I just painted it over top of her dress to add some pink warmth to that. So that's a solid color layer on color. And the opacity is 26%. So you just paint it in, and then turn out with an ivory colored dress, neutral colored dresses. This is a really easy way to make a whole bunch of different colors of dresses without having to own a whole bunch of different colored dresses. That's why I really like my ivory dresses for that purpose, because you can use color or soft light modes to tint them pretty much anything you want, and that really gives you a lot of flexibility that way. So it's really nice. Up here in her flower crown, I needed to reduce the contrast just a little bit more so that I could burn and dodge it back in. So I've done that with the brightness contrast. I then, so here's working on the shadows and highlights of these things. Again, dodge and burn. So that is all of the highlights. And there's the shadowing that's coming in. So again, just creating that dimension. And those highlights are really what start to make it look painted. You'll find the more highlighting you do, the more illustrated your image will look. Zoom out again. I don't see anything happening on these two layers. Sometimes I do things and it's probably something so subtle that I can't even see what it was. But at the time, I obviously thought it was something that needed to be done. Okay, so now we're working on the hair a little bit. So these are more highlighting on the hair. So there's my highlights where I've highlighted them, and then I've done a little bit more again. And some shadowing, just to enhance that painted again. Then, as you know, I have Topaz Adjust 5, and I like to run, once I've done all my dodge and burn, I like to run the mild details. And I'll just run it over the hair, and a little bit, I'll touch the eyes bottom of the nose, the cupid's bow, and the mouth, which just brings out all the detail work that you've done with your Dodge and Burn. So if you have a look here, that's what that does. And that really helps to pump up that painted look as well. And I just love touching it on those eyes and the nose and the mouth here. Let me turn it on and off again. So there's before, where it's really soft, and after. And it's such a great touch. And when you run that after you've done the work of your Dodge and Burn and those details, it just has so much more to grab onto, and it just poof, brings up your image awesomely. I had some funky shadowy things along here, like the hair didn't quite blend in properly right here, so I've just done a little bit of cloning and smudging, etc. to fix that. Cloning up in here, and I've actually smudged the hair with the smudge brush. You can see it's gone from quite detailed to this. I've also, if you zoom, I'll zoom in on her face here, this is where I've taken the smudge brush. See, I've got some noise in the shadowing here and like that. And so with the smudge brush, which is from Scott Deerdorf, his brushes, they're available in my Facebook group. You can see what a difference the smudge painting makes. And once again, really starts to make that look painted. You're getting the real fantasy skin now. This is not true skin. This is fantasy skin, and that's the painted skin, and that's what I totally love about doing with this. A little bit of a touch-up needed in here, just some highlighting for things that I'm going to be doing later. So that was that stage where this one left off. All right, there's a ton of stuff in this file. Some things are much more obvious why I changed them. Other things, I can't tell you why I did it or why I tried it. I just thought, hey, I'm just going to do it. Like, why did you put a purple dot there? But I'll try to explain it as I'm going, but I may not be able to fully explain. That's just a creative process, but it's not something you can pass on to other people. It's just, hey, I thought I would try this because I thought about it. Okay, when I get to this kind of point, I've sort of got things set in the way I want. I'm fairly happy with how it's looking. From here, I would want to kind of give it some oomph, and I have this called a magic button because it's in Greater Than Gatsby. It's one of their color bases. It's kind of a thing that you run first. That it does all kinds of adjustments for you that you would do at this point with your contrast and your saturations and warmth and vignetting and spotlighting and all this stuff that you could do by hand. But I found this one that with my style of editing works awesome, and I always open it up and turn off a bunch of stuff that's inside it. There's just certain things that I like it, and I adjust it, make the vignette stronger, things like that. But watch what it does after I've run it. It does this. So go from that to just giving it this pop. And that gives, all the things that I would do right now by hand, it runs in that for me, and I really like how easy it is to adjust, and so I don't have to do it by hand. So love that emotional color base. Then we're going to just start, we're working with the atmosphere, etc. now. So I've done a gradient fill in a diamond pattern right back here, very softly. It's on soft light white gradient fill in the diamond, and I rotate the diamond so it's kind of an X this way, like this. You can hardly see it in there, but it's giving that bright spot behind, and I've allowed a little bit of it to come over here. Make sure you mask it off of her face, because if it's behind, it wouldn't be shining on her face here, so I've masked it off here. So it's just touching, look at the top of her flowers there, top of her crown where it's touching. So make sure it's not going anywhere that it wouldn't be naturally going from where it's shining behind. So I like always having a kind of a highlighted spot back there. Dusty rose color, and just done a dot on screen, which is given this beautiful light up here. I then took that same rosy color, and I've done a swoosh here and a swoosh here with a brush, and that is also on screen with this soft rosy color. I probably even picked a color out of her dress or something like that, and then I've just done that because I wanted to start bringing in a little bit, introducing more of this pink haze around her. It's at 52% opacity on screen on different sides, a colored haze. I then filled a layer with this sort of champagne yellow color, and I made it on soft light, and you can see how it's really it's taken out a lot of contrast and stuff, but it's given this pretty tint to it. But now I need to bring in some contrast because I've really lost it in that because of doing that. But that was the color tint that I wanted, okay? So then I went into the brightness contrast, and I've now brought back the contrast. So I've bumped up the contrast to 17. So again, this is where you can see I'm going back and forth with my contrast. I like the color tone that I have there, but I need some more contrast. So yes, I've lost a little bit of it, that haze, but it's still there where I want it, and I've just brought back some contrast back into her. Then I found it's too yellowy again, so I've taken down the saturation a little bit just because I like my colors more desaturated, so I've just dropped that down a little bit with hue saturation. I then ran Amelia Bedelia from Greater Than Gatsby, and as you can see from the thumbnail, it's kind of a dot in this corner. That's something I like to do where my light source is coming from, is just add a little dot of that. That's at 70% opacity. It's a dot right here, and it's just this pretty golden light that it adds in there. I found the whole thing still too yellow, so the opposite of yellow is like blue or purple, and so it's kind of like an orangey tone. So the opposite of orange is purple. So I've run something called Freckle Juice, which is a purple haze from, now you could have done the same thing with a solid color, probably a solid color purple layer that would have sort of toned it down, but I ran that and I liked what that did. I just did that's at 61%, and it just sort of killed that orange that I was seeing. Started to fix that for me. This is a solid color white layer. I wanted a little bit more haze, so I did a solid color white layer, and there it is on top. And that's just down at 3% on normal. That's another way that I add haze. Fill it with white, turn it way down on your opacity. Beautiful dreamy haze. Lost some of my contrast again by doing that. And so with levels, I'm starting to bring up some of the shadow areas that I want with levels. And then again, I found it too yellowy, bright, garish as well, like in these yellows. And so I've done hue saturation again. And I've reduced the saturation. That was just no other color adjustment, just took the saturation down quite a bit. So it's very, very subtle now in the coloring. I then wanted to bump up my highlights some more. So I could have used curves, but there's something in Gatsby called a light brush, which is going to do the same thing. This is another way of dodging, but you could have done this with curves as well. But you can see all the places I've kissed light on all the high spots. So it's like here, top of the log, top of the rock, top of this, top of her wings, everywhere. Let's turn it off again. That I wanted to see a little bit more highlighting where the direction of the so you just need to picture where that light is coming in. If the light is coming in here, it's going to hit here. It's coming in here, it's hitting this cheek. It's hitting down here, the tip of the bird here. It's coming down to the top of the log. If it's coming straight down here, it's hitting the top of the rock. It's going all the way over here. You get a little bit on the top of this. So just imagine that triangle of light coming down, and where is it going to hit? What's going to block so that it's not hitting, and where's it going to hit? All the high points that you see here is where it's going to be hitting, okay? The rock was too bright, so I just made a new layer and I painted black over top of it and just turned down the opacity to quickly shadow it down. That's another quick way to do it. This bird was too contrasty. I wanted him to recede into the background, so I reduced his contrast. You can see right away he's way in your face, looks like he's stuck on. Reduce his contrast, blurs into the background beautifully. This is a gradient white. It's actually from Gatsby too. It's a pastel, one of their pastel colors, but it's just a circle of light color glow up there. You can do the same thing with a dot on of a solid color, but it's just giving some more haze light up here. Bottom right corner, I believe. Yeah, see, now there's a purple dot. Why did I put a purple dot there? Well, I'm doing opposite colors of yellow or orangey, and purple is the opposite, and it's down here on the shadowy side, so I thought I'd add some purple in there. So that's one of the Gatsby ones too. It's called Wisteria, but it's just a circle. That's purple. It's a gradient circle. Then I wanted to bring in some more shadows, so I made a new layer. If you look real close, you can see it's here, here, and here. So where this shadow of the rock is, kind of some shadowiness up here and some shadow in behind here, I just took a black brush, dot, to just add more depth. Just shape that a little bit. It may have even been a slightly purple color. Can't really tell. It's so soft. It's on soft light. It's on soft light, which is a cool way to make really soft shadows. I then did another gradient. What is this? Oh, this is one of my tricks for getting your shadows and highlights to just see where you're at with them. You take a gradient map layer, adjustment layer, and you just pick the regular black and white gradient that comes up and change it to soft light. And I have it at 23%, but if I put it right up, it basically, I'll put it on normal. If it's on normal, it'll change your picture to black and white. As soon as you change it to soft light, it starts to play with your contrast. And so I usually turn it right off, and then I just bring it up, and you can just bring it up to where you want to see, like how chunky you kind of want it looking and how whatever. So for me, it's usually around 20%. This was at 23, and you can see how that's just enhanced some of the contrast, and some of that dodge and burn that I've done has just brought it back out again. Love that. Such a great trick for adding some more dimension back into the work that you've done. I did add some sunbeams in here. You can barely see them. I took them, they're so subtle, they're really soft, like, but it just added a little bit more of light up in here. I then added through in my fireflies, which are done with lens flares. You can see that on my YouTube channel. Some more gradient dots. So this is a sideways gradient coming across this way. If I've pulled it across this way, and just kind of a soft champagne-y color as well. So linear coming this way. And then I did it on the other side as well, a little bit more on an angle down this way. So I've pulled it up to, again, add that dreamy haze on the edges. I then felt that it was still a little bit too yellowy, so I ran a photo filter, and it's just one of the cooling filters in Photoshop, and it's at like 25%. How it came up, it's the cooling filter 80, fourth one down, cooling filter, this bright blue, but having that in there at 25% just kind of killed some of that yellow that I wasn't liking. I'm not a fan of yellow. This, I don't know what it did. I think it's actually it's a levels adjustment on her skin, and it's so subtle you can't really see it, but it's just added a bit of pop back to her skin. Just trying to zoom here. It's actually taken some of it's changed her color of her skin in levels. I went with it's probably in the red. Yeah, I've just brought in on the red channel a little bit, and maybe even on the blue channel. Yeah, a little bit on the blue and the red, brought in this upper slider, and it's just adjusted her skin tone a little bit because it was too yellowy kind of too, and so I've added some red and taken out, or added a bit of played with the blue and the reds to adjust that. Then let's just zoom out again here. I then did more curves adjustments, bringing it a little bit darker, but then just putting it where I wanted it. So basically adding more shadow selectively. So it's kind of taking down some of the haze, again, going over some of the shadowy areas that I had there, just bringing those in again for contrast, just so that's not so bright like this. And so it's bringing a bit more focus back in onto her by darkening the edges. Some more contrast adjustments, I think, to just brightening things up. On her face, I found that there's a bright spot here on her cheek that just through some of the stuff I've run, it's made this white hot spot that I don't like, and I thought this side was a bit dark, so I've just with curves taken that down and softened that shadow on that side. So that was 2 layers with curves to just open up that shadow a little bit and fix that bright spot. I then added some more hair highlights on this side because that's the side the light is coming from, just to make it not look the same as the other side. Oops, sorry, that was this one, the hair. Then I did an overall darkening, or sorry, it's contrast, bumping up the contrast again, just because I wanted to make sure that I'm keeping that nice contrast focus on her while everything else remains hazy. I played with the skin tone a little bit more. Oh, sorry, this is the blush. Adding cheeks. And what's this one? They have a Revive skin. If you look at her skin, you see that kind of brightness that's happening to it. It's called Revive skin. That's in the Gatsby as well. You can do that with levels and curves too. It's just pulling up the mid-tone, sliding the red and the blue a little bit, and you get that sort of brightening of the skin. I then did some more, I think this bright spot on her dress was bothering me, so with curves I just knocked that down, pulled the highlights down probably, yeah, pulled down the highlights, as you can see, this top right corner, and that just took away that super bright spot that was on there. Added in more highlighting just to lighten some of the shadows that were a little bit too deep than what I wanted, so that was these are just little fiddly adjustments on the dress, different areas. I wanted a little bit more haze again, so I played with exposure. And if you go into the run an exposure adjustment and go into the offset and just slide this middle one slightly to the right, you get this really nice hazy matte effect. And so it's pretty much on everywhere except I did a big dot, you can see here on the mask, kind of right here, so that that haze wasn't on her face, so that I've got everything else got that beautiful haze, but keeping her a little bit more in the clear. It's only at 81%, so it's not 100% on everything. A little bit more contrasting adjustment again, just playing with those contrasts. I added another one of those sort of champagne layers, but took a lot of it off of her. I just wanted it in that edges just for tinting. This is my teal glow. I have a set of 4 different glows that are they're like a vignette. They'll create a vignette look without making it look really obviously like a circle, around it. And so this is my teal glow, and normally I use it to create a moonlight scene where I give a blue tinge to it, but I actually on this one put it on screen mode, and took it off almost everywhere except on her. And it just, on the screen mode, it added this little glow of something. Something was bugging me in here about the tone that it was having, and so I threw that in and it added this glow. But that was just another way to add a little bit of haze around that was tinted. Brightness. So contrast up again, brightness, contrast. Selective color, I actually took out more yellow with selective color. I took out the reds, I slid the cyan over to 11 just to kill some of that reddish that was in her skin, etc. Again, it's like desaturating because I like my images less saturated. More contrast adjustments. Then I wanted more shadows, so again, new layer, and I painted black. I just kind of swept it where I wanted it. Again, in those shadowy areas, and that is probably on soft light again, 28%. Masked it off where I had done too much, didn't want it. So I'll draw it on like full blast black if I need to see where it's going to go, and then just do that. And threw on my logo, and I think that's the end. Let me just make sure there's not one more file on this. Yep, that's pretty much the end of this one. I did run the revived skin one more time. I don't even know if you can see that. It just to add that extra pop and glow on her skin. Again, you can do that with curves or levels, with the midtones, and playing with the reds and the yellow channels. We'll do that with skin as well. And that is the finished image. So let me just show you before and after again. So here is the before straight out of camera, and here is the after with all of the painting and all those finishing effects. Did I need to do all those things? I don't know. I just kept fiddling around with it until it was the way that I wanted it to do. That's kind of how I flow, how I roll with it. So I hope that gives you some insight into that process of that one, and keep showing me your work. I love to see it. Thanks.